Hey everyone, welcome to another late night review. This is for one of the newest releases of 2024. It is Mean Girls, which is a musical remake of Mean Girls, very popular comedy movie. One of my all-time favorites, and a movie that I grew up with. Well, it's 20 years old now. I guess we're just at that time now where movies from the 2000s will start to see remakes. But the idea of doing a musical remake, I think, is a little more interesting than just doing a straight-up remake. Tina Fey is back as the screenwriter. It's actually based on the Broadway musical. I never saw it because I do not live in New York. I also don't know much about the music, but I do know that Renee Rapp is in the movie, and she actually comes over from the Broadway show. So with the movie, I didn't have too many expectations. I was just hoping for a fun musical that kind of kept the spirit of what Mean Girls is. For the most part, I would say it does that. I don't think it fails at being what a Mean Girls movie is supposed to be. Tina Fey as a screenwriter isn't trying to update too much with the original story. There's a few added details that I actually think improve the story overall, especially with Janice's past. That was something in the original movie that was always kept as like a big deal, and in this movie they're setting it up for being a big deal, a big reveal. This time it's done a little bit better because the actual story, one, makes a lot more like sense on a tension level, and two, it also makes more sense for the times. I think they also do a better job at continuing the downfall of Regina George by directly tying the dance performance for the Christmas talent show. They tie that directly to her downfall, rather than for a random series of events to happen afterward. For the rest of it, though, it's strange how close this movie ties itself to the original, and how it doesn't do much to change a lot of the jokes. A lot of the one-liners are exactly the same. Sometimes the line drops are fit into the music, like when they drop the very famous, four for you, Glen Coco, you go, Glen Coco. They actually add that to the musical. That part makes sense. But then there's other times where they're straight up just reciting the same joke from the first movie. There's that one girl that makes a joke about the tampon, and it's just line for line from the original movie. And, it's funny in the original movie, but just to hear it again, I can't help but just compare it to the original. Why was that not taken advantage of? Like, why didn't they change that specific joke? Sometimes they add a little more to the jokes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like when all the girls are reading their speeches and then fall into the crowd. The girl from the first movie, she was crying, and it turns out she doesn't even go here. That's the joke. They decide to add some extra dialogue that she's here for a track meet, and I couldn't help but think, wait, why are you trying to add some logic to this joke? The original joke was funnier because she literally came out of nowhere. We don't know where she's from. I know I'm really digging into little details here, but you can't help but think of them. When I've seen the original Mean Girls so many times, I know the jokes like the back of my hand. So every time there's a line drop or some kind of mix of the line or some change to the line, I have to question why that was done. And a lot of times I couldn't really figure it out. Like I said, there are new jokes in this movie, but for the most part, I don't think there was enough to really make this a new comedy. I don't think it's all that innovative, which is unfortunate because I was hoping the movie would at least be fun and innovative, given that it was going to be a musical. It's not just a straight-up remake. But it is fun. I don't know if the musical numbers are that memorable. I don't know if I really fell in love with the tunes that much. A lot of the singers are really good. Angourie Rice plays Katie, which I guess the only reason that she possibly was put into the movie was because she might be the only one with some notoriety. I know that Renee Rapp is very popular right now on TikTok. I get that. But for the general audience, I'm thinking from like Paramount's perspective, and I think they put her in the movie because they thought, for the price, she might be the most noteworthy actress we can get in this movie. But still, I guess I don't know why they cast her, because it doesn't seem like she's a singer. The rest of them, I think, are doing a great job at singing, but she was the only one that I don't know if she's actually a singer, and it was a bit underwhelming. But everyone else does a really good job. I mean, you got the actress from Moana who is in this movie, and she is just incredible. And Renee Rapp, of course, I think was great. I had no idea who she was prior to this movie, and I think she does great. And honestly, as far as the acting goes, I don't think you can really beat Rachel McAdams as the original Regina George. It's a great performance that's going to be hard to overshadow. But Renee Rapp kind of does her own thing, and I think it ends up working. Some of the other actresses I actually think really do something completely different with their role versus what the original actresses did. I really liked the one who played Karen. I think she was excellent in the role. She probably played up the stupidity a bit more than Amanda Seyfried did in the original film, but I still think it was just as funny. Some people might think it's overdone, but I actually thought it was really funny. She also has a great song number for the Halloween scene. I don't know if the musical numbers are all that memorable. None of them I'm like driving home singing, but overall the music was fine. And another strange thing, I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but at first, when they were doing the musical numbers, they would actually go into a wider aspect ratio. The movie is 16:9, but they would actually have like black bars on the top and bottom of the screen, which was kind of distracting, but obviously this movie was made for 16:9 television. It was made for Paramount Plus. So the musical moments were in a wider aspect ratio. But then they stopped doing that about 2 musical numbers in. And then it started to be randomized. Like some of the musical numbers were wider aspect ratio, but some of them weren't. And I didn't really understand why this was being done. At first I thought, oh, only the musical bits are going to be like this. And then you cut to like the real world high school. I'm also not a big fan of movies that throw in a lot of like social media or like the camera is from the iPhone and such. A lot of times it just doesn't seem like there's a real reason to do this. I was actually surprised that they used it to great effect. Like they used at one point a bunch of TikTok screens to do like a musical number. And I actually thought, oh, this is pretty creative. I actually enjoy this. And at other times, it would do that as a way to do what the original film did, like when everybody was talking about, oh, who's the new Queen Bee? It might actually be Katie. Maybe Regina George isn't as cool or hot anymore. And instead of just doing random interviews like a fourth wall break in the original film, this movie just does it through TikTok screens. I think it's a creative way to do it, and also it's one that makes sense because that is how people in a high school would act nowadays. The original Mean Girls movie is, I think, a classic at this point, and I think it still holds up very well. I think people can even watch it today and relate to it, and I think that's why this movie, for the most part, is very similar to the original movie. Like, they didn't have to change much because it's ideas that a lot of people relate to. In fact, one of the things I was worried about was that the movie was going to sanitize things a bit too much when it's called Mean Girls. You know, put the movie into a world that's like more with it, which I just don't think works for Mean Girls. Because like the point of Mean Girls is that at times the idea of fairness, equality, feminism, like there is kind of a facade to it all because people are more personal than that. People do have vendettas against each other. People can be mean. Like, that's kind of the original point of the movie. In this movie, I still think sticks to that idea. But what is the movie trying to be? It doesn't sanitize it as much as I thought they were going to. They still do. Like, for instance, you got John Hamm as Coach Carr. Coach Carr is probably a character that maybe they couldn't do today. If you got John Hamm in the role, like, I'm hoping you do a little bit more with it or do something completely different with that character, and they really don't. John Hamm is hardly in the movie. It doesn't sanitize it a lot, but it still doesn't enough to make me question why it was done at all. And I guess the biggest reason they remade the movie is because of the music, but if the music doesn't end up doing much for me, all that I'm left with is Mean Girls, which for the most part is a carbon copy of Mean Girls. So I don't know, it's just, it kind of felt like the Disney live-action remakes where at a certain point you can't help but just keep comparing it to the original and you're hoping for it to do different things, and then every time it does do something different, I'm kind of unhappy with that change. At least with this movie, some of the changes I was happy with, but for the most part, they don't change much. It is very much just the original movie, a lot of very similar lines, not a lot of new lines. I didn't want them to throw in a bunch of easy modern one-liners, but you at least could have done a few other different types of jokes rather than just take the original one-liners from the original film. So overall, I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars. It was fine to watch. I wasn't bored or anything, but I really don't think I'm going to be returning to this one in the future. But I wouldn't be shocked if you enjoy it because, hey, I like musicals, and I'm sure some of you out there like musicals too, and you might just attach yourself to this music a lot more than I did. And if you do, that's great. Thanks for watching, everyone.